Hey everyone, welcome to Inner Peace Better Health, the podcast, where we explore the paths to a balanced and fulfilling life. I'm your host Avik, and today we have an extraordinary guest, Rob Wentz. So, welcome to the show, Rob.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
Lovely, lovely. So, Rob, before we start, I'll quickly love to introduce you to all of our listeners. Dear listeners, Rob is a leadership communication expert, founder of the Unstuck Movement, the best selling author, and the award winning radio personality. So he's here today to share his insights on unlocking the breakthroughs and also secrets of great communicators and turning misses into the messages. So why to wait? Let's get started. Welcome to the show again, Rob.
It's awesome to be here. Hope I can add some value to the audience. Appreciate all that you do with your platform.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rob. It really means a lot. And so when you have you today, so I mean, I want to definitely start with like if you can tell us about a time when you experienced a major breakthrough in your life.
Yeah, I think breakthroughs are something that are it's not just something that happens once in our life, right? We should be consistently experiencing breakthroughs if we're constantly growing and evolving and we have a lifelong learning sort of mentality. And, I point to one breakthrough that really kicked things off for me. About 10 and a half years ago, my son was born. And, leading up to him being born, I had my first, well, not my first major breakthrough, but I'd say the breakthrough that has taken me on a 10-year journey of personal development. I was on the outside doing well. If you would have known me and not lived with me, you would have thought that I was doing really well physically and mentally and maybe financially, career wise. But on the inside, I was kind of in turmoil, kind of a mess, and kind of miserable, honestly. And I was not improving myself. My career may have been getting better. I was in radio broadcasting at the time, and I continued to excel in that area. But as far as a human being, I was not growing. And so, as I found out that my ex-wife, at the time, my wife was pregnant, I had just like a switch turn on in me, and that switch was, it just kind of said to me, "You can't be the person you are right now when your son comes into this world. You've got to be a better example for him." Because I had drug addiction issues, very selfish, self-centered, maybe narcissistic, you could say on some level, but just in general, just kind of miserable with who I was and kind of fed up, but not sure what to do about it. Right. So that instance of my knowing I was going to have a son and knowing that I was going to be a dad and knowing that I could not be the person that I was then as he grew up if I wanted to be a good example for him. I couldn't be that person. That was like a breakthrough in itself. And I think sometimes in life we force a breakthrough to happen, but other times a breakthrough is forced upon us. So for me, it wasn't so much of a choice of like, oh, I better do something about this. It was almost like a compulsion, like I can't not do something about this. So I think when we look at breakthroughs in our lives, we have to look for those kinds of things. Sometimes we have to make ourselves do it. Other times it is almost like forced upon us, like this is something that has to happen for the betterment of my life and the betterment of the lives of people around me. But either way, it doesn't matter how it happens. It just matters that you do it and you see the breakthrough, you accept it and move towards that. But I think for me that was one of the major breakthroughs that I had because it took me from being somebody who was just kind of floating through life to somebody who was becoming more purposeful about their life. I was more intentional about the things that I did. Now, did it go perfectly? Absolutely not. It's still, 10 years later, I'm still figuring it out and I'll be figuring it out for the rest of my life, but it changed the trajectory of my life and how I lived. So that's one of the biggest breakthroughs that I can point to.
Yeah. And
Okay.
uh so Rob, here one thing is like you mentioned about this, like uh, if you can share these steps also to that helped you achieve this breakthrough.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
The steps that you took to achieve this breakthrough.
Well, like I said, in that moment, like, uh, it wasn't a breakthrough that I chose, it kind of happened to me. So I there weren't really
Uh-huh.
I didn't know what the steps were. Back then, I didn't know. I don't know. I was just doing what seemed to be the right thing to help myself get better. And so if I had to name some steps, one of the biggest things I started to do is I found some like online mentors. I did not know that I needed a mentor, so I did not
Mhm.
know how to find a mentor. But thank God, through YouTube, I was
Understood.
shown ads. I was shown ads, and I was just, people pop up in your feed, and you're like, "Oh, that's interesting." And during that time period, some people popped up in my feed, and I started to just listen to their stuff, listen to their content and what they had
Right.
to say. And as I was listening to what they had to say, I was like, "Oh, this
Yeah.
this makes a lot of sense. This maybe is the direction that I should be heading in." And I started just soaking up information from mentors online, which then led to mentors in person, right? So that led me to finding mentors in my personal life. And that was for me the biggest breakthrough, finding somebody who's at least 10 to 20 years ahead of you in any realm and starting to model after what they do. And that for me was one of the most profound things because I had never really had anybody in my life that I was like, "Oh man, I can listen to this person and they're really going to give me solid advice and I really trust them and they're really trying to help me." So, it's amazing that the internet what it has done is bring these incredible leaders, these incredibly successful people who are mentors to thousands or millions of people at the same time, and it inspired me to wanna be that for other people also, but I looked at that as, like, what an opportunity, and you have to have discernment, obviously, discernment of listening to the right people and following the right people and just kind of trusting your own judgment through the things that they talk about, the things that they say, and, the attitude they have towards life. But that was one of the biggest things, the mentorship, finding those people, and that caused a significant breakthrough with me that led me to reading. It led me to, spiritual development. It led me to financial development. It led me to leaving my career and starting my own business. It took me on so many different journeys. But if I could point to one thing, it was be finding those online mentors, which then led to me finding in-person mentors. So that's something I just like to talk to people about is if you don't have a mentor in your life, you're gonna struggle. And if you and ideally have a couple mentors, have a couple of coaches and people of different areas in life that you want to grow in because without those people, it's much more difficult for you to do it on your own. Having an example of somebody who is really way ahead of you and has already walked through this game, that's just gonna be a huge leg up for you. So I just encourage people to search that out, whether it's in a virtual form, but specifically and more impactfully in an in-person form.
That's amazing, I have to say. And also, one thing, like, in your opinion, what sets incredible communicators apart from the rest?
Well, incredible communicators are honest with themselves. It all comes down to personal integrity. Really is the core of it. You have to have an integrity to be a great communicator because you've got to be honest. And so integrity is basically doing what you say you're going to do, right? If you're breaking promises to yourself, that breaks down your integrity. If you're breaking promises to yourself, that lowers your self-worth, your self-esteem, the way you view yourself, your self-value. I just look at it like, if you had a friend who constantly lied to you, if you had a friend who constantly broke promises to you, you probably, unless you had very low self-esteem, wouldn't be friends with that person anymore. But when you live with yourself, which we all live with ourselves, if we're constantly breaking promises to ourselves, telling ourselves we're gonna do one thing and then doing another, that kills that integrity that we have for ourselves, and if you don't have integrity for yourself, then you can forget about anybody else having integrity for you or you having integrity for anyone. So it all starts with you. And so with communication, it's really hard to communicate effectively when you don't have your ducks in a row in your own personal life. So I would say when it comes to communication. And some people might not even be great verbal communicators, but because they hold themselves to such a high standard, when they communicate, you listen because you know that person does what they say they're going to do. And I think that somebody who's able to like verbally communicate really well, it also comes from just practice, speaking a lot and learning a lot, and then applying that. So I would say integrity at the top of that list for great communicators.
That's really lovely. And also, like, when we're talking about this, uh, oh, I mean, uh, the first thing is like, what advice would you give to someone who is struggling to find their own message? Uh, I mean, because like in your case, like, how did you turn your personal mess into a message that help others? So, if you can share along with also some advice for the listeners, that will also be great.
Yeah, turning the mess into a message, like, first you've gotta get through the mess, right? So if you're in the middle of the mess, it's gonna be kind of hard for you to make it a message. Now you can talk, it's not saying you can't talk about your journey or speak about or teach about your journey as you're going through it, you can. And not saying, I think that we're all always working through the mess to make it a message. So that you may have gotten through a stage of it, but you might still be going through another part of it. I say that like, for me personally, I'm still on my personal development journey, and we all are. If you wanna get better, you're never gonna not be on that journey, but you can always speak from where you're at. But if you're gonna make the mess a message, then you've gotta get super clear on what the mess is, what the mess was, and what were the steps that got you through it. So when you asked me earlier about the steps of breakthrough, in that certain instant, in that story, I didn't have during that time a framework for the breakthrough. But after experiencing other breakthroughs in my life and then also talking to hundreds of people, whether it's an interview, podcast, or coaching them, I've heard hundreds of stories of breakthrough, and I boiled it down to a couple of things. And I call this the vitals system. So, vitals, VITALS, right? For our health and our vitality, you go to the doctors, they take your vitals, they check your vitals, right? To see where you're at, how healthy you are. So, if we have vitals for breakthrough, this is what I would say those six things are. The V is for vision. So, you've got to have a very clear vision of where you're going, and that's gotta be the more clear the vision is, the bigger the breakthrough is you're going to have. The I is for impact, right? So, impact to me is like when you say a word, somebody's name pops into your head or their face pops into your head. That means that person has made significant impact in the area that they have made an impact in, right? So, you should want to be somebody that when somebody says a word like breakthrough or somebody says a word like leader, your name pops up. That ideally, that's what I want to be for people, and we should all desire to leave an impact on the world and the people around us through the things that we've gone through. The T is for technology, right? So, technology is all around us. Whether it's a newspaper, a pencil could be technology, you know what I mean? Obviously, social media, the internet, that is technology, but everything that we use to our advantage, that was created for us to create is a piece of technology that we use. So, how are we using our technology effectively? Are we using technology for us, or is technology using us? And so learning how to effectively use technology to grow and then also to impact others. The A is for action and activity. What actions are you taking throughout the day? What activities are you involved in throughout the day? That will show you who you are and where you're heading. The L is for leadership. Clearly, leadership is everything. To be a great leader, what does it mean to be a great leader? I should desire to want to lead my own life, and I think when I boil leadership down, I boil it down to personal leadership. And if I don't take control of my life, if I don't demand that I'm the leader of my life, then somebody else will lead me, whether I like it or not. If somebody says they don't want to be a leader, well, then unfortunately you're letting something else lead you, and that's kind of out of your control. So leadership is up there, and service, the S at the end of that is it's the vision and service are the end caps of this vital system because they are the two most important pieces of the puzzle because you have to have a mindset of being of service to other people, not of always being served. And if you can focus on how am I going to serve others, you get out of your own way, you get out of your own nonsense, and now you're like, okay, how can I help other people? And the only way for me to make my message, the only way to have a message is to serve people with the message. If I'm going to have a mess, usually the mess is because you're kind of like self-wallowing selfishly in your mess. At least for me, that was the situation. I was in a mess, and when you're in a mess, you become very self-absorbed. When I changed that concept over to being of service, okay, if I'm gonna help people, what am I gonna help them with? Well, I can help them with the things that I've gone through. So I've got to get out of my own way. I've got to get out of this mess. I've got to make it a message, because once it's a message, now I can be of service and help other people with it. So those 6 things, that vital system, is what when I work with
Well,
people,
yeah.
how I guide them through making that mess a message.
Exactly. I mean, I have to say that your journey is definitely a kind of not kind. It's a testament to the power of transformation, because it's really encouraging to know that others can do the same as well. So there is definitely a possibility. So
Yeah,
that's really great. And
and
is
that's
this
the
like
point, man. I mean, you gotta be an example for other people, I think. That's why I do my podcast too. My podcast is called the Unstuck Movement, right? And the whole point of the podcast is stories of how people got unstuck, how they found breakthrough in their life, because we need those examples.
exactly, exactly. Lovely. And one more thing is like when we're talking about the breakthroughs or the messages, uh, was there a specific vision or the dream that changed your direction in the life? I mean, if you can share, like, and also like, how did you act on those dreams to make it a kind of reality?
Mm. Yeah, as far as the vision goes, one specific dream I had back in 2021, and it shaped and it continues to shape every day, how I look at my days, and it all comes down to service. I had this dream. I was driving in my car with my grandma, and my grandma had passed away at the time, and she was driving the car, which she never drove a car. At least I never rode in the car with her. And she was driving the car, and she reached over and she held my hand, but it was weird. I had a little kid's hand. I was like a little kid in the dream, and we were going over this bridge in my town. And while we were going over this bridge, she reached over and she hugged me, and I was like, "Grandma, stop hugging me. You're gonna wreck the car." And she just said, "Don't worry about where we're going. Just love me. And don't worry about where you're going. Just love people." And so, clearly, I'm a man of faith, right? I believe in God, and I'm in that dream, and that was God speaking to me, basically telling me that the simple tenets of the Bible, the simple takeaway of the Bible is to love God with all your heart and to love your neighbor as yourself. And that's what God was saying to me, was love him and love people and just show up for people. Be of service to people. Stop worrying so much about where you're going, and focus on the people in your life and how you can be there for them more. I'm still not perfect at this. I still try every day to get better at it. I still every day will forget to do it, and I'll get selfish and caught up in my own stuff. But at the end of the day, I always come back to that dream, because it's like, okay, refocus. How can I be there for people? And I think for me, that was, I mean, clearly a vision, because it was a dream, but that vision is the best things in life are simple. That's so simple. It's so simple. Just show up and love people. Don't worry about yourself and what's gonna happen to you, because everything's gonna work out. I look at my life, and I'm not sure about your life, but I look at my life and I'm like, "Man, everything has worked out really well in spite of me, in spite of all my worrying, in spite of self-sabotage, in spite of feeling like I don't know what I'm doing, or I'm not capable, or I'm not worth it, or whatever. Things have worked out incredibly well." And so when I look at that, I'm like, "Man, why do I worry so much? Just love people and show up for them." And the more you can do that, the better you can do that, the better you can serve people at a higher level and get out of your own way, the better your life is gonna get. And it's such a simple vision, but that is the vision that I hold on to, that I just have to be there for people, not at the and I think here's the thing too, people think, if I'm gonna be of service to other people, then how am I gonna help myself? It's amazing how it works out. When you start serving people and helping people, you get better. You no longer have to sit and wallow in your own nonsense. You go out and you help somebody, They feel better, therefore you feel better. It's counterintuitive. We think, especially in this I generation we live in, that I should sit with myself. I need to go to therapy. I need to work on me. Not saying that you don't, because I've done all those things, but I also do know the more that I help people, the better I feel and the better things get. So if I had to say a vision, that would be my North Star kind of vision for why I do what I do.
That's really amazing to hear from you. And so also it's really great like that building self-worth is the foundational to achieve or achieving the breakthroughs. So your advice is definitely helpful. So any particular advice that you think listeners who are listening today will be a kind of takeaway and will be helpful as a first step in their uh, in their life?
I'll just go back to, if you have something that's a mess in your life, which we all do, I'm sure somewhere, somehow, are you self-wallowing in that mess? Are you just kind of like, "Woe is me" in that mess? And listen, I get woe is me. My wife just told me this morning I need to stop wallowing in my own 'cause I do this thing like, I wanna get up at a certain time in the morning, and if I don't do it,
Yeah.
I can get on my own case, right? And so she'll it's great to have people in your life who keep you in check, and she's like, "You're kinda wallowing in your own, like, nonsense here." So if you find yourself wallowing in your own nonsense, then how can you switch that to being of service to somebody else and get out of your own way, right? So if you have something that's a mess and you feel like you're just kind of repeating the same pattern over and over again, how can you do that differently today? And how can you help somebody else, and it'll get your mind out of where you're at into doing better? Let me just give you a real quick example. There was this guy, I had him on my podcast. He had a great story because he was about to kill himself. It was Thanksgiving evening. He was gonna commit suicide in his apartment, and he got a call from a local church that I guess maybe he had been a part of, and they asked him to come. They needed volunteers to, like, seat people for their Thanksgiving dinner, and this guy, he was gonna kill himself that night. He's like, "Oh, fine. I'll go down to the church and I'll seat people." So he goes down there, and there's a line of people, they're coming in, and he's, like, talking to people, helping them find their seats, getting them meals, and this, that, and the other thing, and he noticed by the end of the night, he was so joyful. He was so happy. He was, like, he totally forgot about the fact that he was gonna kill himself, and in that evening, also, he noticed he loved helping people. He loved talking to the people that came in. He also noticed the people coming to this Thanksgiving dinner were way worse off than he ever was, and he noticed that he loved being, like, able to get them to their seat. He loved being able to help them with whatever they needed, and it made him feel really good. So it gave him a bunch of things. It gave him things that he was good at. It gave him value, and it also gave him this purpose, and it also let him realize, "Hey, if I go help people, I'm probably not gonna kill myself. If I sit in my apartment all day long, I might end up killing myself." So, as drastic as that might sound, it's, like, that simple. Just get out of your own way. And listen, I'm preaching to the choir because I can get in my own way so easily, but I know the more I talk about it, the better it gets. So that would be my advice for people. Get out of your own way.
That's amazing. Really amazing, Rob. I mean, it's really great having conversation with you. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and insights today. And to the listeners, if you want to learn more about unlocking breakthroughs and becoming a great communicator, be sure to check out Rob's work at the Unstuck Movement. And remember, your journey to the inner peace and better health starts with a single step. So stay mindful and take care. Have a great day.